beautiful woman, a strange death in Haiti, and the arrest of a man claimed by the Israeli government to be a Nazi war criminal, a former SS commander responsible for a mass execution in 1943 in France. Coincidence? In a compartmentalized world, one of the most remarkable figures to appear in contemporary fiction, Julius Sonnen attempts to follow the thread that leads from a mass execution in the Pas de Calais in the eve of the Normandy invasion to an operation by the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, to aid the resistance, and to the CIA and the secret the American intelligence community has kept locked away in classified archives for more than 50 years. In Langre, Milton Parrish, with the serious probing intensity of his pen, award-winning essay, Citizen Informer, weaves against the backdrop of modern Haiti, World War II, and the Holocaust, a tale of intrigue, deceit, and murder you won't soon forget. Carl Jemison, 50 years old, a mathematics teacher at the local high school and married to the same woman for 10 years, answered his doorbell one evening and was confronted by agents of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who produced an arrest warrant and spirited him away in handcuffs. In the ensuing days, Carl Jemison learned why he was being detained. It was not because of anything he had done. It was because of something done more than 20 years before in another country, France, by a colonel in the German army named Karl Kleinman, the real identity, according to Israeli Nazi war crime hunters, of Carl Jemison. One morning, more than 20 years after the war was over, a man was digging on a piece of property he had recently acquired when the blade of a shovel struck a human skull. He called the police, and further exploration uncovered a mass grave. Forensic examination determined that the skeletal remains were those of 11 humans. All had been shot, almost certainly in one mass execution, because the shattered bones presented no pattern as would have resulted from individual executions. Even in the skulls, the penetrations and damage were haphazard. The victims had been writhing, trying to ward off death, and in fact this was verified by the unearthing of a cluster of corroding .30 caliber machine gun shells about 3 yards from the grave. The gunner had sat with his back to a barn, and the killing had taken place beneath the silent gaze of a horse, a wooden bust above the barn's double doors. The press report of the discovery caught the attention of a man whose habit was to read in the Manhattan Public Library newspapers and periodicals from around the world. His name was Julius Sonnen. Sonnen went so far to fly to Paris. Sonnen met a local rabbi who had led a delegation to N and convinced the local authorities to allow the remains to be buried in the Jewish cemetery.
Ah, those names. Everyone has seen them. Nobody knows any of them, and I will tell you why. Shame. You see, what happened there in France was quite different from what was happening in Germany. Many Germans were in total agreement with the singling out of the Jews. Many believed that the Jews had too much. They believed the Jews were too wealthy, powerful. This was not the case in France. In France, the Jews were merely despised. Even when there was great wealth, even titles, there was something greater: to be a Frenchman. No Frenchman believed in his heart that one could be both a Jew and a Frenchman. Dreyfus, that animates Le Pen, and those schoolboys who dig up Jewish corpses in order to impale them through the anus with a stick. The Jews were not feared. People didn't think there was something to gain by their debasement. And many Jews themselves wanted nothing more than to cross this no man's land between being Jews themselves and Frenchmen. Then too, it was different in France. France was occupied by the Germans. The Germans were the enemies. And so, when the Gestapo came to take away the Jews, who had been completely invulnerable to the French arrogance, they were embarrassed. And yet, there were acts of heroism. Of Frenchmen, now they were being designated as by their enemies, helping Jews. We know about them for the most part, but people have stopped coming forth to say anything. And once again, the question is beginning to be asked, who is a Frenchman? Asked, by the way, by many to whom the question would not have occurred just a few years ago, at a time when France was looking at the world through barbed wire.